From TV to music, more and more people are sharing their experiences with suicide. Most of the time, their experiences come with significant others, family members, and friends that want to help and support their loved ones to overcome their suicidal thoughts. However, the story of Michelle Carter is not one of help and support for her suicidal boyfriend. Today, I will be discussing the similarities and differences between multiple news sources on their coverage of Michelle Carter's conviction for involuntary manslaughter of her suicidal boyfriend, Conrad Roy. In today's world, it is important to stay up to date with stories that cover such important issues like suicide. Everyone is exposed to suicide, whether it's through the media or their own personal experiences, and issues that are as important as suicide should not be ignored. As mental health issues become more common in America, it is our job to be aware of what to look for and how to care for our friends and family that may be affected by these issues. While we need to know the things to do, we must also be aware of what not to do when helping and supporting our loved ones. In this speech, I will be covering the different points of views from several news articles that focus on the involuntary manslaughter case of Michelle Carter. Every suicide case is unique, but this case has a different side that many won't expect. On Wednesday, February 6, 2019, the Massachusetts Supreme Court upheld its 2017 involuntary manslaughter conviction against Michelle Carter for encouraging her boyfriend to commit suicide through text messages. Her boyfriend, Conrad Roy, was found dead by suicide in his truck back in July 2014 from carbon monoxide poisoning. The charges resulted in 15 months behind bars and 5 years of probation out of a possible maximum sentence of 20 years. The conviction came from evidence in the form of text messages from Michelle to her boyfriend and texts from Michelle to her friends. She stated in a text to her friend, "His death is my fault. Like, honestly, I could have stopped him. I was on the phone with him, and he got out of the truck because it was working, and he got scared, and I told him to get back in." In other text messages to Conrad, she encourages and urges him to end his life with different methods of suicide, such as hanging, jumping off a bridge, and stabbing oneself, and how his family would understand his decision to commit suicide. The conviction sentence can start as early as Monday for Michelle, because of a law that states a person might be charged with involuntary manslaughter for reckless or wanton conduct that result in a person to commit suicide. There are many different news sources that covered this story. This is what they had to discuss in their articles. CBS News article, Massachusetts Supreme Court upholds conviction in texting suicide case, focused more on the text messages and things that were said between Michelle and Conrad than the other articles I found. Using quotes from Michelle's messages and how her reckless conduct and urging was the reason for her boyfriend's suicide. The article, Michelle Carter sentenced for text urging suicide of Conrad Roy, from BBC News, talks about Conrad's family and what they have to say more than the other articles, which do not mention them, while also talking about the mental illness that both Michelle Carter and Conrad were dealing with, but the judge found that her age, maturity, and mental state did not have a significant impact on her actions. The next article, by David K. Lee from NBC News, goes into detail about the laws used in creating the conviction and the decision of the court and its judge. The First Amendment about protected speech is highlighted within the article because of the law that states a person can be charged with involuntary manslaughter for wanton conduct that causes a victim to commit suicide. The last article is from CNN, written by Elliot C. McLaughlin and Karma Hassan. Also writes about the court's ruling and the laws that were considered with giving out the conviction sentence. This article goes into detail to discuss Michelle and her messages to Conrad about not backing out and getting back into the car and finishing what he had started. They last put in a quote from the attorneys about the involuntary manslaughter conviction with an absent defendant that using only words of encouragement to help the other person to commit suicide. With a topic such as suicide and involuntary manslaughter conviction, what you want to know and get out of the story is important when picking a news source. A big part of this conviction was based upon the text messages that were sent by Michelle Carter. The articles written by CBS and CNN are the most important about the real events that took place and what was said by Michelle to Conrad on the night of his suicide. While insight into the court process and the laws that led to Michelle's conviction are more heavily discussed in the NBC and CNN article. The last article by BBC is the only one that really goes into detail about what was said by Conrad's family and how the mental illness of Michelle was said to not have a significant impact on her actions concerning Conrad's death. Looking at all the articles, the most helpful and informational article is the CNN article, Women Convicted of Coercing Boyfriend into Suicide Through Text Messages Will Remain Free for Now, Not only does it talk about the laws that were involved with the trial, but also how Michelle's words played a part in Conrad's suicide. Each trial and suicide is different, and these articles shed light into the suicide of Conrad Roy and the conviction of Michelle Carter. All the articles give good information about the conviction. Some give insight into the court process of the trial, and the others focus more on Michelle's texts and Conrad's family. However, the articles that I found all teach about suicide and the implications of urging someone to take their own life. These articles took the story and each spun it a different way and used it as a learning opportunity for the audience to learn about the court system, suicide, and involuntary manslaughter. Mental health issues will always be prevalent in society, and the story is an example of how the actions and words of a loved one or friend can influence a person's mind for the worse and result in a sad ending for both parties involved.